In short, we think these data have radically improved the likelihood of our getting approved. And they're so strong, in fact, that we believe will qualify for an accelerated approval pathway, both here and in the EU.
Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of our 3-part series dedicated to helping investors understand the significance of Moleculin's recent announcement in January regarding its development programs, with a special emphasis on Annamycin for the treatment of the AML. So in part 1, the replay is available at virtualinvestorco.com. Moleculin CEO Walter Klemp summarized the importance of complete responses, or CRs, in assessing Annamycin's performance and likelihood of approval. So in this part 2, we would like to take a deeper dive into the meaning of second-line therapy in AML and how Moleculin believes Annamycin will fit into the competitive landscape. So this discussion is about the company's expectations surrounding this subject. So welcome, everyone. My name is Janine Thomas, CEO of JTCIR, and I will be the moderator for today's series. So before we get started, I just want to inform our audience that Moleculin Bio is listed on NASDAQ and trades under the ticker MBRX. And during today's discussion, the company will be making forward-looking statements, and actual results could differ materially from these forward-looking statements. Some of the factors that could cause actual results to differ materially from these contemplated by such forward-looking statements are discussed in the periodic reports Moleculin files with the Securities and Exchange Commission. These documents are available in the Investors section of the company's website and on the Securities and Exchange Commission website. We encourage you to review these documents carefully. So, Wally, with all that, welcome back. So happy
Glad
to have
be
you
here
with us.
again. Great.
Great. So, Wally, could you help investors understand the significance of second-line therapy in AML and how that relates to the opportunity for Annamycin?
Sure, Janine. Look, it's critical that informed investors understand how we see Annamycin fitting into the competitive landscape in AML. And that really starts with an understanding of the patient journey and what therapies are currently approved. In simple terms, second-line therapy is what patients are treated with if first-line therapy fails them. If patients don't respond at all, we call them refractory. More often, though, they may initially achieve a CR, a complete response, but will then quickly relapse. And while it can sound as though second line is less important than first line, that changes when you realize just how many patients are refractory to or relapse from first line therapy. Look, the patient journey in AML is complicated. And it's complicated enough that we created a brief animation to help paint the picture for investors. So let's play that now.
Information in the video is based on management's beliefs, and data shown are preliminary and subject to change. Acute myeloid leukemia, or AML, is a type of cancer that affects the blood and bone marrow and is characterized by the rapid growth of malignant white blood cells. There are approximately 160,000 people with AML worldwide, with about 20,000 newly diagnosed patients annually in the U.S. Unfortunately, effective treatment options are limited, and only 29% of people diagnosed survive beyond 5 years. In order to improve this overall long-term survival number, we need to focus on giving more patients access to potentially curative treatments. While the actual course of treatment can be complex and highly individualized, all AML patients are initially categorized based on their ability to undergo intensive chemotherapy. As a result, around 50% of patients are deemed fit for standard intensive first-line treatment, and the other 50% are deemed unfit. Those who are deemed fit are most often treated with the standard induction therapy of 3 days of intravenous daunorubicin or equivalent anthracycline and 7 days of intravenous cytarabine, also known as Ara-C. Only about 36% of these patients, or approximately 18% of overall AML patients, will have a durable complete response to first-line therapy, meaning the level of cancerous cells in their bone marrow has been reduced to 5% or less. At this point, they either qualify for a bone marrow transplant or hope for the remission to become long-lasting. Bone marrow transplants can be successful in as many as 80% of eligible patients. However, since so few patients actually get to this point, only a minor subset, equaling around only 14% of all AML patients, reach this positive outcome through the standard first-line pathway for fit patients. Looking back at the 50% of patients who were deemed unfit for first-line intensive chemotherapy treatment, these patients are usually treated with a combination of venetoclax and azacitidine, also known as Ven/Aza. The success rate in this group of patients is only around 37%, or approximately 19% of all AML patients, achieving a durable, complete response and qualifying for a bone marrow transplant or achieving long-term remission. Similarly, bone marrow transplants are successful in as many as 80% of these eligible patients. But again, only a small subset of the deemed unfit patients, approximately 15% of all AML patients, achieve this positive outcome. In recent years, the approval of new targeted therapies were expected to provide renewed hope to second-line patients and transform the way AML was treated. Unfortunately, success here has been relatively limited. 5 such drugs have been approved to date, but each is only relevant to a subset of AML patients who happen to have the requisite genetic mutation, and response rates are relatively low. Only about 21% of second-line patients will achieve a durable, complete response, which means only another 11% of the AML population is given a chance to beat their disease with a successful bone marrow transplant or lasting remission. This leaves about 58% of all AML patients who will ultimately succumb to their disease. Moleculin believes this is not an acceptable outcome and is advancing Annamycin, a next-generation, non-cardiotoxic anthracycline for the treatment of AML. Anthracyclines are an important class of first-line tools for physicians, and while effective, their maximum dose in patients is limited due to issues with cardiotoxicity. In multiple clinical studies, Annamycin has shown no signs of cardiotoxicity, allowing physicians to dose higher than currently set limits. Moleculin is working to make this important tool available to the approximately 58% of all AML patients who do not achieve a positive outcome with the current paths of treatment. In clinical trials, Annamycin, in combination with Ara-C, also referred to as Anarac, has demonstrated the ability to generate a complete response in approximately 40% or more of second and third-line patients. If approved, Annamycin could nearly triple the number of second-line AML patients who achieve a positive outcome. Moleculin believes in better treatments and more tomorrows. For more information, please visit moleculin.com.
Wally, that was super helpful in illuminating the unmet need and the opportunity for Annamycin. Could we now tie together this picture of unmet need and the actual performance numbers you've recently announced for Annamycin?
Yes, and that's precisely where we would like investors to focus and understand. To begin with, let's look at the actual CR numbers for all the drugs currently approved for use in second-line patients. And then let's compare that to the performance we've seen so far with Annamycin. Now, there's a lot of information here, so don't worry about digesting it all right now. In fact, all of this information is already public, but we've gathered it in all into a few simple slides to help investors understand how we see the landscape. Also, we've posted this on our website so investors can study it in more detail at their convenience. For now, though, let's just focus on the big picture. Whether you're looking at CRs or the combination of CRs and CRIs, Annamycin is currently performing better in its trial than any of the currently approved second-line therapies performed in their respective approval trials. Now, this is based on our current clinical trial data in progress, so the results are preliminary and they're subject to change. And I do need to say that with this chart, we're comparing the results from 6 different clinical trials, each of which having its own unique trial protocol. So this comparison has to be considered anecdotal and not a true statistical comparison. Regardless, we believe the history of CR rates used for approval by the FDA is entirely indicative of the bar that we should have to clear to win an approval for Annamycin. So this comparison is relevant when you're trying to predict our likelihood of success. Now, although Annamycin is technically performing at a higher level on this chart, you would be within your rights to say, it looks like others appear to be close. For example, olutasidenib appears pretty close in terms of combined performance. But there is a detail not seen in this chart that gives Annamycin a tremendous advantage. You see, all of the currently approved second-line therapies are targeted therapies. They're targeting certain gene mutations that are only present in a subset of AML patients. And that means they are only effective for those patients. Once you factor in that limitation, the following chart shows you what percentage of the AML population actually benefits from these therapies. Now, the orange bars represent the CR rates from the prior chart, and the blue bars reflect what we call the prevalence-weighted benefit expected from each therapy. As an example, IDIFA was approved on a 19% CR rate. And that's represented by the second orange bar from the left. But IDIFA targets a gene mutation called IDH2. And IDH2 only occurs in 12% of all AML patients. So when you multiply efficacy of 19% by a prevalence of only 12%, you're only helping 2.3% of second-line patients. When you add them all up, all of the targeted therapies combined are only expected to produce CRs in about 21% of second-line AML patients. But Annamycin isn't a targeted therapy. We've been testing it in all AML patients, regardless of genetic mutation. So the prevalence-weighted benefit isn't limited to any subgroup. And what that means is the expected percentage of all second-line AML patients achieving a CR from Annamycin is double that of all existing therapies combined. So essentially, if we continue to produce this level of performance after approval, we should triple the number of second-line patients who have a shot at curing their AML. Now, we believe we're talking about impacting thousands of lives every year if we can get Annamycin approved.
This is really exciting, Wally. How do you see this translating into an approval pathway?
Well, in short, we think these data have radically improved the likelihood of our getting approved. And they're so strong, in fact, that we believe will qualify for an accelerated approval pathway, both here and in the EU. We're about to run out of time again today, so I look forward to unpacking our intended approval pathway in part 3 of this series.
Well, Wally, I am very much looking forward to that too. So this does conclude part 2 of a 3-part series. If you did miss part 1, please go to virtualinvestorco.com, and then we will also have information about part 3 when that comes out as well. So Wally, so happy to have you join us for part 2 of the part 3 series. This does conclude our Virtual Investor What This Means segment featuring Moleculin Biotech. I'd like to thank you, Wally, for joining us. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for your participation. And again, please check back at the website, virtualinvestorco.com, if you missed part 1, and we'll be putting out part 3 in the near future. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again, Janine.